Boom, hey internet, Jon Phenom, clothing brand mentor, and you read the title. I'm going to break down terms and words that I think you should know, terminology that I've picked up in my over 20 years of working in fashion and working for different streetwear brands throughout my whole time working in the fashion industry. So thinking about the best way to do this video, at first I was gonna do each word and term, but that doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna go through these terms alpha, like A to Z, and these are all words and terminology that have come up in consulting, or I might use them on my channel when I'm describing a scenario or a situation, and I'm so used to hearing the language and these terms because I've worked in the industry so long. So just wanted to make an official video kind of letting you know what all of these words mean. So I want to start with artwork. I know that sounds super simple. Most of the time we're referring to a graphic, right? So artwork on a tank top or a t-shirt. That t-shirt or that t-shirt graphic can also be used on fleece. But specifically, it's pertaining to the artwork of a graphic designer or art director that they prepared for that garment. But we can also talk about artwork in more of a micro sense. So it could be the artwork that's on a metal main button for denim, or maybe a leather patch for denim. Inside of that is going to be artwork no matter how small or big it is. And so that's typically created by either the apparel designer or the art director or graphic designer. It depends on the hierarchy of your company. But even the contents of an information label can be referred to as artwork, when in one sense it can be just copy from a production manager, but technically we would still refer to that sort of decoration or whatever those graphics are or the choice of font as artwork as well. Okay, B is for base. A base can refer to a color, like a base color, but we would also call that the self, right? So now we're kind of blurring between color and fabric, but the base can be referring to color and referring to fabric. One analogy is how you might say jeans, when jeans is actually the silhouette or the cut, and you might also say denim, which is just the fabric, but when people say a pair of denim or a pair of jeans, you understand what they're talking about. So base or self is kind of the mother fabric. So let's say you color block a jacket that has two different tones on it. The more dominant tone, meaning the fabric that's being used the most, would be the base or the self. So let's say you're talking about using it again on the interior, or maybe to use a patch of it underneath an interior label and say, hey, maybe we use a patch of the self or the base inside of here to accent the interior label. So this is helpful in a couple scenarios where you're trying to pick out a panel or talk about a certain panel or how you might organize a design. Also, when you're naming a style, a certain colorway, typically we'll go with the base or the self, which is the most dominant. So if it's navy and heather, you will always go with navy if that's like the body and only the sleeves of like a fleece are heather. You would never call it that. You would just call it navy, but some people might use a combination. If you go one or the other, you will always go with the base or the self, which is most dominant. Okay, I'm gonna put these two together. What is a capsule and what is a collection? So I did an entire video. I'll put a link to that. It looks like this, but there's a link to that in the bottom. So the difference between a capsule and a collection, I did that in a drop. But a collection, you would think of something you see at a runway show, where there is very much a forethought concept and theme. It's like dropping an album, right? There's storytelling that has to do, or a core concept that the designer has, and those have a lot to do with more traditional fashion with runway. So that's a collection, a really well thought, larger grouping of apparel that goes all together. Now, a capsule can be something smaller. The way I look at a capsule is it could be a drop of just like one piece, but typically it's gonna be 3 pieces or more, at least a top and an accessory, maybe a hat and a shirt, maybe a graphic that goes on the shirt and also on a fleece. But that small 3 grouping can be a capsule. Capsules are a little bit more fluid, not as grandiose and traditional as a collection. C is for cut and sew. I think all of you guys know cut and sew. So as opposed to creating garments through blanks, like in America how we do with t-shirts or fleece, typically we'll screen print, or you might do heat press or DTF. However you decorate that and then serve that to the public and say, these are our t-shirts or these are our fleets. Those are made with blanks. Technically, we would say those are getting decorated if you're using an embroiderer or a screen printer or even heat pressing. But if you're making a garment from scratch, it's completely custom, that would be cut and sew. So the pieces or the panels or the fabric is being cut into pieces and it's being cut and sewn together. And typically that will deal with minimums, which we're gonna talk about later. But cut and sew is just custom SKUs, custom garments, custom apparel. All right, these for distributor. We're going on the sales side of things. So distributors were bigger several years ago. Not to say that distributors don't exist now, but when wholesale and brick and mortar retail were really the keys to thriving with clothing companies, distributors were golden. So distributors would represent an entire or a portion of a country. So when I worked at Orisu, we had a distributor in Russia and in Canada and in Japan. So those individuals or those companies and organizations would represent our brand in the other countries. Now, distributors could come in different forms nowadays since the landscape is much more B2C. When you're just selling from your e-commerce, right, from your Shopify, and you're going direct to customer and there's less wholesale going on, generally speaking, distributors have taken new forms. But basically, it's a person or an organization that will do a mass buy from wholesale. So they'll do a big chunk, one big number, and then they'll represent that in an area that is their expertise or is their neck of the woods, whatever that area, city, or country might be. Okay, what is a drop? Also called a delivery. And so that is just when, a date when a item, a garment, a design is being released to the public. Okay, so drops and deliveries can be synonymous. Deliveries, the way we've used them in traditional fashion, is the seasons will have a specific amount of drops. So fall and spring, also holiday will have a ton of drops in there, but it depends on the size of your company and how much demand there is for your company. So back when we would go to brick and mortar and wholesale as the main way to sell your clothing, you're gonna have multiple drops in spring, fall, and holiday and back to school, depending on your audience again, but you might have 6 deliveries in spring. So there will be a spring 1, spring 2, spring 3, etc. So that's just creating new styles to go and give to the retail so that they can give more ammunition to the buyers that want to buy from that brand or from that label. Nowadays that everyone is doing merch and everyone is a brand, a lot of times they'll just do drops, which again is a lot more informal. Keystone, I talk about this when I'm talking about sales or I'm talking about brick and mortar. So Keystone is basically doubling your wholesale cost, right? It's increasing that by 50%. So one example is you might sell your t-shirts wholesale for $12 and then the Keystone for that is going to be $24, but with retail they like to go a little bit higher, so it might be $25, $26. So you want to give them the edge so that they're making a little bit more profit. It gives them a little bit more incentive to purchase your brand wholesale. So Keystone is just doubling wholesale. Knits, a lot of people ask me what knits are. I'll talk about it freely. Easiest thing to do is just Google knits and then go images and see what we're talking about. But a lot of times it's just shirts, okay? Knit is actually the construction of it, but if you go to a department store that has big categories still, or just go to Ross and Marshalls and go knits, if they categorize it that way, you're gonna see a lot of examples of shirts that are knits. Okay, quick strike. This just means it's a drop or delivery that's ready to go quickly. It's almost like an at-once buy. An at-once buy is something like stock that is already available for you to order today and right now. So again, back when we used to sell more to retail and brick and mortar, a quick strike would be an incentive for a shop to buy a brand because they have an at-once or a quick strike that's ready to drop immediately. So many times at trade shows, when you're buying 6 months to a year in advance, you're waiting all that time to get the product that you're seeing like now. So a lot of brands would create quick strikes that they could assemble quickly. A lot of times it's soft goods or printables, things that they could deliver to market in just a matter of of days or weeks. That is what we call a quick strike. MOQ, everybody should know MOQ. It's minimum order quantity. So we're basically just talking about minimums. We're talking about the minimum number of units that you have to buy to do business with a vendor. So a lot of times you'll hear me say the MOQ in China is gonna be anywhere from 500 to 1,000 pieces, right? That's the minimum order that you can make on one design. Now they might break that up. So they might say you have a 500 piece minimum, but you can do 2 colorways. So one design, but maybe you do it in navy and you do it in Kelly green. That would be the same design, but 2 colorways, 500 piece minimums, meaning 250 navy, 250 green. And there's a lot of other examples of how a factory might break that down, but that's what MOQ is. It's basically the minimum buy. Okay, sample. I'll talk about this a lot, a sample, and this is also called a proto. Okay, a sample is just an example. It's a test of your design, and this has to do with cut and sew. So in the beginning process, once you send out your designs, the factory is going to send you a sample. Sometimes they say a counter sample. Sometimes they'll refer to it as a proto, meaning a prototype. It is a prototype of your design which they're proposing to do in mass production. So a lot of times there's a sample and then a salesman sample. This doesn't exist as much now. Still, bigger companies that sell to retail will have prototypes, counter samples, and salesman samples. Salesman samples are the semi-final or final product, so it's showing the quality of what their buy is going to look like once they put their numbers in and do a mass production, a mass buy of those designs. One more note, there's also a production sample. Now your salesman samples and your production samples could be the same sample, but there might be one more that you do that's 100% correct, which you call the production sample, and that is your copy of what they're going to produce in mass. Let's say they're gonna do 1,000 pieces of each design. You might keep a set of the production sample so you can hold them by the quality of what they made for you in the prototype phase and say, hey, all 1,000 of these in all of their sizes need to retain the same quality as this production sample. Soft goods. When I say soft goods, I'm basically talking about printables, okay? And I've heard a little bit of variance in the use of this, but when I am talking about soft goods, I'm talking about t-shirts and fleece. Anything you can buy in blanks is what I think about as soft goods. Now, I've also heard people talk about soft goods with knits, so that could include cut and sew and their blank production. So with a lot of these terms, it kind of depends the way the company is using it, the way the culture is using it. So in some cases, you have to be hip as to how they're using it. SMU, that stands for special makeup, and that's basically when companies would do special collaborations with big retailers, right? So you would do an SMU grouping or an SMU capsule for maybe Tilly's or Active. So it's basically them and you putting together something that you're offering that's a little bit different. You're not offering it to the retailers because these guys can do big numbers. And so it's basically a special collection that's just for them. And that could be as big as small as you as the brand and them as a retailer agree, however big you guys decide that is. These groupings are fun and interesting. I've known many designers that are SMU designers, and so they get to flex their talent a little bit because it's really understanding that customer and that audience in what is going to sell, and also offering something special that you're not giving to other retailers and you're not selling on your e-commerce. Tech pack, by the time I'm dropping this, you guys probably know what a tech pack is. It's basically a blueprint of a design or a garment, and that can be printables as well. It can be blank shirts and hoodies. I sell tech packs. It's one of the biggest selling items on CBA, but it's a very, very important for cut and sew. You're basically creating a recipe for how to make that garment. So everything from measurements to colorway to fabrication, all of the artwork you need to assemble and put together the garment is what would be in a tech pack. Now, I share this story. In New York, a lot of people would refer to the tech pack as CADs, okay? And they would say, hey, do you have the CADs, or can you send over the CADs? Again, this is that terminology thing where you just gotta decipher what people are saying. And again, if you don't know, just ask, because the culture at different companies can vary. Ooh, hope that helps. There's a lot of knowledge there that I don't realize people might not understand. If I missed anything, Drop it below. Let me know what I should add. I could definitely do a part 2 or part 3 if need be. You guys got questions? Drop it all down below or email me here. And don't forget, guys, all of this is going to be available for free in helpful links. If you already have access to pre-launch, then this is going to be available on helpful links. If you don't, all you need to do is sign up for pre-launch. It's 100% free and it was recently updated. So it's going to have all of these words with definitions and images and pictures, and any ones that we update from here moving forward. Just trying to help you get to that next level. More solutions for your brand at CBA. See you guys on the next one. Peace.